Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chromosomal Mating Program webinar today. Today, we're super excited to be joined by Sara Westberry. Sara received her Bachelor's of Science in Animal Science and a Master's of Science in Agriculture and Natural Resource Sciences at Tarleton State University. Throughout her time at college, she had the opportunity to work with both beef and dairy cattle. She then decided to focus on genetics and reproductive technologies and was hired by STgenetics once she completed graduate school. She works with the genetics team to create tools and services to maximize the benefits of STgenetics products, including the design and implementation of the Chromosomal Mating Program, which STgenetics launched in the fall of 2018. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sara.
Thank you so much, Kim, for that introduction. As she said, I'm Sara Westberry. I'm the Genetic Services Leader at STgenetics, and today we will be discussing the Chromosomal Mating Program, specifically what makes this program unique and how you can use it to maximize profitability in your herd. Chromosomal mating was launched in the fall of 2018 at World Dairy Expo, and since that time, we've mated over 2.3 million females for a total of over 5,000 mating events. We have over 1,200 farms currently utilizing the program in 48 different countries. On this slide, you can see the countries that are highlighted in blue are currently using chromosomal mating, and we're constantly adding new features to the program to make it more accessible in more countries in the future. When we think about the goals of any mating program, truly the main goal is to develop a more profitable dairy farm. And there are several ways that we can improve profitability. We can increase production, improve health traits, have a longer productive life, or improve fertility. The most important part of any mating program is selecting the correct bull team. And this is where you have the opportunity to select bulls with superior genetics and traits that increase profitability on your farm. If we look back at the history of mating programs, the first mating programs were very basic, where we used the phenotype of the mating pairs to determine which were the best pairs to mate together. So for instance, if we had a shorter cow, we might select a taller bull to try to get an average between the two in their progeny. But what we found is that the problem with corrective mating programs is that they don't consider the genetics of the parents. So we know that phenotype, or how an animal looks, does not equal genotype, or what their capability is to pass on their genes to the next generation. So a cow could be short, but actually have genes that would make her offspring taller. To better account for the genetics, we started including pedigree information in our mating programs, which was about 30% reliable. However, now we have genomic evaluations available, and this is the most accurate information to use in our mating decisions because genomic evaluations are 60 to 70% reliable. If you were to genomic test your herd, you would be able to rank your animals based on genetic merit, and your rankings might look similar to the bell-shaped curve below. So you would be able to determine what your top-end females are based on traits like net merit, TPI, health traits, reproductive traits, or eco-feed. And you could also use a combination of all of these traits. You could then select which group of animals you'd like to use to make replacements. And we have that circled here in pink on the right-hand side of the bell-shaped curve. And you could breed this group of animals to sex 4M high purity semen. You might choose to use those animals on the left-hand side of the bell curve to breed to beef semen to make a highly valuable beef on dairy cross calf. And so with our chromosomal mating tool, you're actually able to maximize the value of the progeny from that top group of females circled in pink, and you're also able to identify those females that can be bred to beef semen that are on the left-hand side of the bell-shaped curve. There are a couple things that make our mating program unique, and one of them is that the goal of our mating program is to optimize an economic trait while accounting for inbreeding depression. We know that inbreeding negatively impacts a lot of the economic traits that we select for in our breeding decisions. And so we need to understand how this inbreeding is affecting the profitability of the next generation. Chromosomal mating does not maximize each individual mating, but rather increases the profitability of the next generation. It does this by taking the animals that you provide from your dairy farm and the bull team that you select and increasing the trait that you're selecting for, such as net merit or TPI, to the greatest potential across the entire population of females in your herd. I like to explain a couple of terms related to mating programs, and the first is estimated breeding value, or EBV. This is the additive genetic value of all the genes carried by an animal. So the EBV of a calf would be the sum total of the genes contributed by the sire and the dam of that calf. The next term is predicted transmitting ability, or PTA, and this is what an animal will transmit to its offspring. It's essentially an estimated breeding value, or an EBV, divided by 2, as an animal will transmit half of its genes to its offspring. And this is what we most commonly see in bull-proof information and female genomic information, such as 1,000 pounds of milk or a PTA net merit of 850. Most modern mating programs utilize parent average PTAs, or predicted transmitting abilities, to determine progeny potential. And what I mean by that is shown in the example on this slide, where if we had a bull of 800 net merit mated to a cow of 600 net merit, we would assume that the progeny would be 700 net merit. And the way that we arrived at that PTA value was we simply took the PTA of the sire, added it to the PTA of the dam, and divided by 2. And most of these programs limit inbreeding to an arbitrary number, such as 8%. So this means that the program would not allow any mating pairs that would produce progeny with greater than 8% inbreeding. But the problem with this strategy is that we don't know what that 8% of inbreeding actually means. So we need to actually quantify what the inbreeding depression is for a certain level of inbreeding. So the question becomes, why has inbreeding been limited in the past? So historically, dairymen were encouraged to minimize the increase of inbreeding in their herd. And the reason for this is that we didn't know which traits were going to be expressed if 2 animals that were highly related were mated together. So if both of those animals carried genes for a negative trait, they were mated together, then their offspring had the potential to express that negative trait. So increasing homozygosity, or the relatedness of genes, could have resulted in the expression of negative haplotypes. But we've been able to overcome this issue in the chromosomal mating program because we can actually avoid mating carriers of negative haplotypes if both the sire and the dam have been genomic tested. So more homozygosity, or relatedness of genes, does mean less diversity in the genetic makeup, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's less genetic value. And so we'll continue to explore this topic later in the presentation. So we need to be able to quantify inbreeding and really understand the impact that it's having on profitability. So the chart that you see here is produced by the USDA, and it actually quantifies the negative impact of inbreeding on the traits that we select for. On the left-hand side of the chart, you can see the traits, and on the right-hand side, you can see the inbreeding depression, or the negative impact of inbreeding, for every 1% of inbreeding that an animal has. So if you look at the bottom row, for every 1% of inbreeding that an animal has, net merit decreases by $25. And the CDCB, who's the entity responsible for genomic evaluations in the US, utilizes a measure of expected future inbreeding, or EFI, to adjust for inbreeding depression in US evaluations. So they're actually using the values that you see on the right-hand side of the chart in PTA values that you see in bull-proof information and female genomic information. And so I'll show you an example of what that looks like on this slide. So we have 4 bulls in this chart that were all genomic tested, and they had the same unadjusted net merit of 1,000 net merit. You can see in the middle column that they each have varying levels of expected future inbreeding, or EFI, and this is the expected future inbreeding level of an animal's offspring if they were bred to the general population based on pedigree information. In the right-hand column, you can see the adjusted net merit value, which is what would actually be reported in the bull's proof information. And so you can see there's a drastic difference between the bull that has 7% EFI and the bull that has 10% EFI in what their reported net merit value actually becomes. And the way that we arrived at the adjusted net merit value is we took the unadjusted net merit and then we subtracted the EFI multiplied by 25, as that's the inbreeding depression for every 1% of inbreeding that an animal has in a net merit calculation. So the formula that we need to use to determine progeny value is genetic gain minus inbreeding depression equals the economic value. And the formula that we use specifically in the chromosomal mating program is called the predicted producing value, or the PPV, and it essentially forecasts how a female will perform in the herd. And it's essentially an estimated breeding value adjusted for that EFI penalty that we just talked about. And this formula was actually published by a group of animal scientists in the Journal of Dairy Science in 2013, where they said that this was the best formula to determine female profitability in a mating strategy. And so I'll briefly describe the formula here for you. There's 3 parts to the formula, and the first part of the formula is getting the EBV of the future calf, and we do that by taking the PTA of the bull and adding that to the PTA of the dam. We then add in the inbreeding depression that was originally taken out of their PTA evaluations. And the reason that we do this is, if you remember, an EFI penalty was given to individual animals by the CDCB based on if they were mated to the general population. In a mating program, we're going to be mating 2 specific animals together so we can identify their relatedness and how that impacts the inbreeding of their offspring. And so we add in the inbreeding depression to get them back to their raw or unadjusted values. So we do that by taking the inbreeding depression multiplied by the addition of the EFI penalty of the sire and the EFI penalty of the dam. We can then identify the actual inbreeding of the progeny created from this mating pair. And the way that we do that is if both the sire and the dam have a genomic evaluation, we can use the CDCB genomic relationship file, which identifies if 2 of those animals were mated together, what the inbreeding of their progeny would be based on genomic information. If only pedigree information is available, we can also identify the actual inbreeding based on the number of common ancestors of the sire and the dam. So what we're able to do is actually subtract the inbreeding depression multiplied by the actual inbreeding of the calf to get our PPV value. I'd now like to give you a couple different examples of why you should use a mating program to maximize profitability in your herd, and specifically why you should use genomic evaluations in your mating strategy. And so the first question to address is, why use matings at all? So many farmers use a selection criteria for picking different bulls based on traits that are important to them and the profitability of their farm. And then they use those bulls that meet that criteria randomly across their entire herd. And so an example of what that might look like is here on the screen. So you would be able to put in the criteria that you'd like for bulls into STgen.com, and it would produce a list for you of bulls that meet that criteria. So that criteria we have here is 750 net merit, 2800 TPI, greater than 5 on productive life, greater than 1 for DPR, and greater than 120 pounds of combined fat and protein. 2 of the bulls that would come up on that list that match that criteria would be Cobb and Jester. And you can see based on their trait values here that they're very, very similar in each of these categories for net merit, TPI, combined fat and protein, DPR, and productive life. And so the question is, because these bulls have similar trait values, will they produce similar progeny if they're mated randomly across an entire population of females? So to answer this question, I use chromosomal mating to mate each of these bulls to the same female to see if they produce similar progeny. So the female that I used had a genomic evaluation for net merit of 447, and you can see the results of mating this female to Cobb on the top example. You can see that the progeny inbreeding for this mating pair was 11%, and the progeny PPV net merit was 1401. You can then contrast that with the example of mating Jester to the same female that has a progeny inbreeding expected to be 21% and a progeny PPV net merit of 1160. So in this example, if you would have used each of these bulls randomly and mated this female and chose to use Jester instead of Cobb, you would have experienced a $241 opportunity cost over the lifetime of that progeny, as that's the difference in the progeny PPV net merit between each of these bulls. And so this is why it's so important to use a mating program so that you can identify how related the bulls are to the females in your population and how the resulting inbreeding will affect profitability. Because based on this example, you can see that Jester was more highly related to this female, and that caused a greater inbreeding depression in his progeny. The next example I'd like to show you is contrasting a pedigree mating versus a genomic mating. And for this example, I compared mating one cow with 3 full brothers. And you can see those full brothers here are Denver, Dion, and Drama. And across the top, you can see their pedigree information is exactly the same because they are 4 full brothers. And just based on their net merit evaluations, Denver has the highest net merit across this group of bulls. So the first time I used chromosomal mating, I only included pedigree information. And then the second time I ran the program, I included the genomic information for these animals. You can see in the gray box in the middle of the screen the outcome of the pedigree mating through chromosomal mating. And you can see that Denver was the best option for this particular female because he produced the highest progeny PPV net merit. On the left-hand side, you can see the different boxes with each of the bulls and the pedigree inbreeding of the expected progeny from each of these bulls. And you can see that it's exactly the same at 14.1%. And the reason that it's the same is because pedigree inbreeding is measuring the number of ancestors that these bulls share in common with this particular female. And since the bulls each have the same pedigree information, they have the same pedigree relationship to this female. However, if we look at the genomic inbreeding of the expected offspring for each of these bulls, it's very different. So for Denver, the expected genomic inbreeding of his progeny is 18%, Dion 18.5%, and Drama 13%. And the most common question is, why is the genomic inbreeding of the progeny different between these bulls if they're 3 full brothers? And the reason for this is because even though they have the same parentage information, they didn't receive exactly the same genes from their parents. So if you think about if you have a sibling or know someone that has a sibling, you know that your siblings and you look very similar. You might have similar traits, but you're not identical. That's because you received different genes from your parents than your sibling did. And the same with these bulls. So when we're looking at the genomic relationship of these bulls with this female, we know that they are not going to be the same because they don't have exactly the same genetics. So when we include this information in chromosomal mating, we can see that the results actually change. They're in the second gray box that you see here, where Drama actually becomes the best bull for this particular female, and Denver moves into second place. So in this situation, if we would have chosen to use pedigree information instead of more accurate genomic information and chosen to use Denver instead of Drama to mate this particular female, we would have experienced an $85 opportunity cost over the lifetime of that progeny, because that's the difference in the PPV net merit of the progeny from Denver and Drama. So it's always very important to use the more accurate genomic information in your mating decisions. The last example I'd like to show you is a mating strategy focusing on reducing inbreeding versus a strategy where we're trying to increase genetic gain. So previously I mentioned that Historically, dairymen have been encouraged to select for mating options that reduce inbreeding or limit it in future generations. I also let you know that in our formula for determining progeny value, we include additive genetics minus inbreeding depression equals the economic gain. And so to illustrate the differences in these strategies, I have a female here that was mated to both Captain and Solely. So you can see the outcome of mating Captain to this particular female resulted in a progeny inbreeding of 13.5% and a progeny PPV net merit of 1505. I mated the same female to Solely and had an expected progeny inbreeding of 12.5% and a progeny PPV net merit of 1206. So if we look at the comparison between each of these, Captain's progeny did have 1% higher inbreeding than Solely's progeny, but Captain's progeny is expected to produce $303 more in her lifetime than Solely's progeny. So this is just re-emphasizing that we can't just simply limit inbreeding because we might be missing opportunities for genetic gain. Rather, we need to include additive genetics and inbreeding depression in our formula for economic gain. Just to summarize the last couple examples that we talked about, there's 3 ways that we can avoid leaving money on the table in a mating strategy. The first is to use a mating program so that we're able to identify the best mating pairs to make the most profitable offspring. The second is to use genomic evaluations in our mating decisions. So we're actually able to account for the actual relationship of each mating pair to identify pairs with the highest progeny potential. The third is to optimize the predicted producing value, or the PPV, in the chromosomal mating program, which includes the inbreeding depression of the selected trait. It penalizes the actual genomic relationship of each mating pair and calculates the best solutions to increase profitability of the progeny. I'd now like to transition and just talk to you about a couple of the different options that you would have to use chromosomal mating based on the information that you have available for your herd. We do have 3 types of matings available in chromosomal mating. The first is a corrective linear mating, where we simply need your female IDs, and then we're actually able to score your animals based on phenotypic traits in our chromosomal mating linear app, and then we use the STgen.com website to finish the mating. We can also use the pedigree information you have on your females, including the female ID and sire ID, to complete a pedigree mating. And we also have genomic matings available, where we need your females' IDs as well as their registration numbers, which are those 17-digit unique IDs that were used for their evaluations with CDCB. To specifically focus on corrective linear matings, we do have a mobile application available for Android devices where we can score your animals based on their phenotypic traits on a scale of 1 to 9. We can then synchronize the information from the phone to our website, where our program actually uses a similarity matrix to identify mating pairs that minimize the distance to ideal type values. If you have pedigree information available for your females, we can upload that information to our website, and then when we run a pedigree mating, we have a database that contains over 5 million male and female pedigree records, and we actually trace those relationships as many generations as we have in our database. And this gives us the most accurate representation of the actual inbreeding that will occur in the progeny based on pedigree information. If you have genomic tested your females through genetic visions, we can actually identify the female's most recent up-to-date genomic evaluations based on their 17-digit unique ID and include that information in a genomic mating. As I mentioned previously, we also utilize the genomic relationship file provided by the CDCB to determine the actual inbreeding of the resulting progeny from different mating pairs. As I also mentioned, a critical factor of our genomic mating is that we're able to avoid mating carriers of known negative haplotypes. Within chromosomal mating, you also have the opportunity to either optimize a single trait from the list of traits you see here, or create a customized index, where you can select the traits that add the most value to your farm. I'd also like to highlight that you can use EcoFeed in your optimization process and chromosomal mating as well. Another feature that we have available in chromosomal mating is being able to track your progress over time if you have genomic information available on your females. So you can see here, there's an example of a farm with their different birth years for their females and the progress that they've made based on health and repro traits. We also have production traits available, as well as different indexes and type traits as well. And if you'd like to see that in a little bit different format, we also have linear charts available where you can see the progress you've made in certain areas and maybe some areas that you'd like to make progress in the future. To wrap up our conversation about chromosomal mating, I just want to highlight again that chromosomal mating truly harnesses the benefits of both genomic testing and sex semen to increase profitability of your herd. I really appreciate your attention today. If you have more questions, you can email us at genetic.services@stgen.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for all that information, Sara. I do have a few questions for you. If a producer is not 100% genomic testing, can they still utilize the chromosomal mating program?
Yes, that's a great question. So the program can actually take in all the information, both the genomic information from those that have genomic evaluations, as well as the pedigree information, and optimize based on the information that's available. So it would give a genomic mating to those that have a genomic evaluation and a pedigree mating to those that have pedigree information.
Now, if a producer was to sign on for this, how long is the process to onboard a new farm?
It's really simple to do. So we, based on the different mating options that we have available, whether it's linear, pedigree, or genomic, we just need to collect the appropriate information on your females. So that might involve scoring the females. If it's for a linear mating, it might be getting pedigree information for a pedigree mating or just the registration numbers for a genomic mating. And then actually running the mating program is very fast. So it really is a simple process that can take a day up to a week, depending on how long it takes to get the information that's needed.
So Sara, let's say that I'm a producer and I need to utilize my herd more efficiently. How will this help me do that? Does it help me categorize my herd better? Does it make my sexed versus beef semen decisions easier? Will it show me easily which animals I should maybe invest more in? What do you see it as?
Our genetic services professionals can actually really help you identify those animals that are going to be best to be used for sex semen. And that'll take into consideration the traits that are most important to you. And then our program actually helps you maximize the profitability of those animals that you're going to breed to sex semen. And it also allows you to identify those females that will be used for beef semen. And then it all comes back in the same mating. So in the same mating, you'll have those animals that will be bred to sex semen, and you know that those animals are going to be maximizing your profitability, and then also have those beef matings available. So it's very simple for your breeders to use when they're actually going to breed these animals.
So will all the information within the chromosomal mating program update with each proof?
That's a great question. So yes, everything is updated. Even when we do base changes, everything like that is all included in the program. When you use our genomic testing service, we can just identify the updated CDCB results based on the 17-digit unique ID of those females.
And how many traits can a producer choose to create their own index? Is there a limit?
There's not a limit. So we would recommend that you would choose 4, maybe 5 traits that are ideal for you, because the more traits you select, the more limited you're becoming in optimizing those individual traits. But you can truly use as many traits as you'd like.
Now, for the first herds who have adopted the chromosomal mating program, have they seen the profitability in the next generation? Has it improved their herd, Sara? What's their feedback?
Yes, so we've had a lot of customers that have given us very positive feedback especially when they use genomic testing in combination with chromosomal mating. That's where you maximize the benefits of the program is when you combine choosing your most valuable females based on genomic information, and then using that information in the chromosomal mating program. So they're actually able to use those charts that I showed at the end of the presentation to monitor that progress over time and see the increase in the traits that they've been selecting for, whether that's net merit or TPI or any of your health or repro traits as well.
And last question I have for you today, what are the biggest differences, or we could say advantages, that the chromosomal mating program really brings to the industry? What makes it different from all the other breeding programs that are available today?
So the chromosomal mating program has two major advantages to other programs that are currently available. First, we actually quantify the inbreeding depression that's being caused by inbreeding in the next generation. So as I mentioned in the presentation, most programs just limit the amount of inbreeding, but it's to an arbitrary number. So we don't know what the value of that inbreeding is. And as I showed in the example of Captain versus Solely, we had the opportunity there to reduce inbreeding, but in doing so, we actually lost a lot of genetic gain. And so utilizing the predicted producing value as the formula for progeny potential, we're taking into account both additive genetics and inbreeding depression to get the most accurate view of how that animal will actually perform in the herd. And the second major advantage of using chromosomal mating is that we use genomic evaluations from CDCB, and we also use the genomic relationship file. There's no other programs on the market that are currently doing both of those things. And the importance of that genomic relationship file is identifying more accurately the inbreeding of the future progeny of a mating pair based on that genomic information. So those are the two major advantages of chromosomal mating over other programs available today.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sara, for all your great information today. I sincerely appreciate it. And like Sara said, if you want more information about the chromosomal mating program, go to stgen.com or send an email at genetic.services@stgen.com.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.